Good afternoon, everybody. It is Steve Lookner with Agenda Free TV. We are bringing you some live coverage because the NTSB has released their preliminary report on the Baltimore bridge collapse. That is that incident that happened on March 26th, where the key bridge in Baltimore collapsed when a cargo ship ran into it around 1:30 in the morning. So, you know, when there's a big update on a story we've covered, sometimes we do a stream on it. I wanted to come on the air and just show you the report and look at it with you and talk about what this report says. This is still under investigation. The investigation is not over, but there are some interesting details in the report, and we have the report. So I figured we would do a stream and talk about it. We're going to look through the report. We're going to take some of your comments and questions on the air. So you can write to me during the broadcast at Lookner on X. At Lookner on X is where you can reach me, and I'll be looking at the chat as well. And I appreciate all of our moderators who are here. We have AJ and Ruth Krafasi here right now. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We have... I should also check and make sure. There's a weird thing now with X where they stopped having chats on the live streams on X. I'll check there real quick and see if it's any different today, but it may not be. Thanks to our Twitch moderators. Papa Bear is over there moderating on Twitch. Really appreciate it. Let me just pull this up here on X and see how it looks. Let's see. No, I don't see. Well, I'll give it a minute and see if I see a chat. Oh, no, they have a chat. I'm sorry. They have it. Sometimes they have a chat, but it's not working the way it should be. So anyways, that happens sometimes too. Anyways, I'll keep an eye on that. But thanks to our moderators over there, and Linda and Larry moderate for us over there when things are working properly. And thanks to Kay Lowry Body, who's moderating over on Facebook right now. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Kay. And thanks so much to Alicia Rivera for the Facebook stars. All right. So here we go. I want to go over this now. We have the report. See, the report is right here. So we can look at this report. I'm going to go through it with you. I think the thing I'm going to first talk about, because I feel like that's like the headline, is the part where it talks about the ship losing power, I think about 10 hours before it hit the bridge. So, by the way, in case you need to remember, oops, you know what? It says Steve will be back in 1 minute. It shouldn't say that. Sorry. There you go. Okay. In case you needed a refresher, that's what it looked like. Actually, until yesterday. I might show that later, a clip of when they've demolished the piece that was resting on the ship. But that's that container ship Dali, and it hit the bridge, that major bridge there in Baltimore, and collapsed. So we are going to tell you what the NTSB said today about this in their preliminary report. But I think a big headline has been that there was a power outage on the ship some hours before it actually some hours before the ship actually hit the bridge. So I want to show you that first, and then we'll go through the report. Going to kind of just go through it together and talk about it together. Maybe a little bit more of a dry stream today. Oops, you know what I didn't do? Look at that. The headline's all messed up. You know, sometimes I forget to do things, guys. Let me fix the headline here. I apologize. That is sloppy and my fault. There, now the headline is fixed. Sorry about that. Man. There, that's better. Okay. So here's what I want to show you first. Again, this investigation is still underway. They haven't explained everything. That's going to be the full report. Offered their whole assessment. But I would say this is a headline, and then we're going to start from the beginning. But you can see it says electrical power loss on previous day. So this section says on March 25th, about 10 hours before leaving Baltimore, the Dali experienced a blackout, loss of electrical power to the HV and LV buses during in-port maintenance. Now remember, very shortly before hitting the bridge, the ship lost power. Just minutes before hitting the bridge, the ship lost power. But you can see here it says about 10 hours before that, about 10 hours before leaving Baltimore, it lost power during in-port maintenance. Also, the NTSB is not aware of any other vessel power outages occurring in Baltimore or while in its prior ports, Newark or Norfolk. So it lost power during in-port maintenance. While working on the diesel engine exhaust scrubber system for the diesel engine driving, for the diesel engine driving the only online generator, generator number 2, a crew member mistakenly closed an inline engine exhaust damper. I can't tell you what all this means. I'm not, a ship mechanic. Closure of this damper effectively blocked the engine's cylinder exhaust gases from traveling up its stack and out of the vessel, causing the engine to stall. When the system detected a loss of power, generator number 3 automatically started and connected to the HV bus. Vessel power was restored when crew members manually closed HR2 and LR2. Generator number 3 continued to run for a short period, but insufficient fuel pressure caused its speed to decrease and its breaker, DGR3, opened. A second blackout and other loss of electrical power to the HV and LV buses occurred. In the meantime, the crew had reopened generator number 2's engine exhaust damper, and the generator automatically restarted and then connected to the HV bus when DGR2 closed. And then some really technical stuff while recovering from the second blackout. This is about 10 hours before the ship actually left port. The crew switched the bus configuration to use breakers HR1 and LR1 and the bus's associated transformer TR1 instead of breakers HR2 and LR2, which had been in use for several months. TR1 and its associated breakers, HR1 and LR1, were in use when the ship departed on March 26th. So I have no idea if this had something to do with, why it failed 10 hours later. The first in-port blackout was caused by the mechanical blocking of the online generator's exhaust gas stack. The second blackout in port was related to insufficient fuel pressure for the online generator. During both of these electrical power loss events, the online generator's breakers, DGR2 and GGR3 to the HV bus, opened before the HR2 or LR2 breakers opened. During the recovery, the crew put TR1 online to feed the LV bus because TR2 had reportedly been in use for several months. The first vessel blackout after departure on March 26th occurred when the HR1 and LR1 breakers opened unexpectedly. The NTSB is still investigating the electrical configuration following the first in-port blackout and potential impacts on the events during the accident voyage. So a couple things here. There were 2 blackouts in port about 10 hours before it left Baltimore. One of them was caused by a crew member mistakenly closing an inline engine exhaust damper, okay? And then the second one was caused following the first one. So I don't know why this crew member mistakenly did this thing to cause this blackout 10 hours before. And then something else I notice here, even though I'm certainly not a bridge expert or a ship expert, is you do see, because they mention this, that the crew switched something up on the ship. While recovering from the second blackout in port, the crew switched the bus configuration to use breakers HR1 and HR2 instead of HR1 and LR1 instead of the breakers they had been using for several months. Okay? And then when the blackout happened right before the bridge, that blackout occurred when these newly in use breakers, HR1 and LR1, opened unexpectedly. So again, I'm not an expert, but you do see that something they mention is there were these 2 blackouts in port 10 hours before the ship left port. The first of the two blackouts was caused by a crew member making a mistake. And as a result of these two blackouts in port, they switched the breakers and then to these two breakers that had not been in use for several months. And then the actual blackout that happened right before the ship hit the bridge occurred when those two breakers that were newly in use opened unexpectedly. Okay, so again, they're not giving you a complete explanation here, but that's certainly all interesting stuff, and it's stuff that they have chose to mention in their report. Let me take a couple of comments here. Our viewer Mort's 730 thinks ships shouldn't go completely dark with no ability to steer. That I couldn't comment on, but maybe there's something in here about it, or if not, they might comment on in their full report. Our viewer Always in the Rain thinks it never should have left port. Fraxella says it was a mistake, not on purpose, or was it? Well, the NTSB is saying it was a mistake that caused the blackout in port 10 hours before it left port. Okay, let's see here. GCC Demon says new breakers popped, cutting power all over the ship. The damper wasn't the problem. Eddie says maybe ship should not have left port. I'd be interested in knowing. So, it mentions that there was a by the way, I don't know that I don't know for sure that there's a connection between the blackout 10 hours before it left port and then the blackout on the ship right before it hit the bridge. I would assume that's something they're looking into, a possible connection between those two. But I'd be interested in knowing, they say that the blackout 10 hours before, the first of the two blackouts 10 hours before, was caused by a crew member mistakenly closing something. Now, how big a mistake is that? Is that the kind of thing where if you know about ships like this, you're like, the crew member did what? How would or is it just something where like, oh, that happens once in a while? I don't know. I can't tell you how big a mistake it was for the crew member to do that. But it is interesting that they say the blackout 10 hours before wasn't caused by like some failure of machinery. It was caused by the crew member making a mistake. Thanks to Janet Burnett. I appreciate that, Janet Burnett, and all our new member, Wixie for Duck's Sake, and our members like Lonnie McGee, A to Z, Lynn Downing, and our other members. So that is interesting. We're going to go over the report from the beginning, though, but I wanted to just show you this part because a lot of people are talking about this part. Yeah, Sinan says, I'm sure one of the shipping YouTube channels will explain. Yeah, I know like Sal Mercogliano, he has a good shipping YouTube channel, so maybe he'll have some thoughts on, some people with like him with more detail, with more specialized background knowledge might have some insight into what this means. But this was this report just came out a couple hours ago. So I want to just go through it with you. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to post a link to the report. That was dumb. I'm going to post it right now in the chat so you can follow along and look at it yourself. I just posted a link to the report in the chat. James Brown thinks it's a huge mistake if the ship is running. Oh, 3 Kanos has a question about the bridge design. So we're going to get to that. They talk about the bridge design in the report. So we'll talk about that. Ron Stahlcup says, will that crew member be arrested? So to be arrested, it would have to be shown that there was good evidence they committed they violated the law. I don't know if making that kind of mistake is in any way of a violation of the law. I am not familiar with the maritime law, U.S. and Maryland. So I don't know. Nisto says a new guy on ship by mistake. Yeah, I don't know why the crew member made that mistake that caused a blackout 10 hours before the ship left port. It's a good question. These are good questions. So it's very interesting, though, that they say that the blackout 10 hours before it left port was caused by the first of the two blackouts. And the second kind of like followed from the first. But the first of the two blackouts caused when the ship left port was caused by a crew member mistake. I mean, it's interesting that a mistake happened by a crew member that was such a big mistake. It was such a big mistake that it caused a blackout on the ship. Okay. Let's do this. Dwayne Stanridge said, did the crew member do that on purpose? According to the report, it is a mistake. So I would think, Dwayne, that the NTSB would not post that it was a mistake unless they had evidence it was a mistake. I think if they didn't know for sure it was a mistake, if they didn't think they had enough evidence to show that, they wouldn't say mistake. They would just say for some reason. But they say it was a mistake. All right. Rule says hiring an unqualified employee is negligence. Look, maybe if it turns out that mistake 10 hours before the ship left led to the blackout that caused it to hit the bridge, maybe that's something that will play. There could be negligence lawsuits or something like that. Maybe that could be an important detail. I don't know. Was the person properly trained? Were they properly supervised? Were there checks that were supposed to be in place? That I can't tell you. Just Mike thinks it was like closing the chimney while having a fire in the fireplace. Nigel Fortune says, will some press conference happen on this? So I actually looked, Nigel, and I didn't see any announcement by the NTSB today that they were going to do a press conference on this. So my assumption is no. I would think they would have announced it by now. If they were doing one, I would show it to you. But I am not aware of any press conference being given by the NTSB on this initial report. But we are going to talk about it. Diana Lynn lives less than 5 miles away. All right, so let's get into the report. Let's get into the report. I showed you the part talking about that little part talking about the blackouts, the two blackouts 10 hours before it left. Let's get into this. There's plenty to talk about, and I just kind of want to go through and talk again. It's maybe a little more of our one of our more maybe technical dry streams, but I think it's important to go through the report. So I figure if people aren't interested, they won't watch. But if you want to watch, we're going to go through it and talk about it with you guys. Okay, so let's talk about this. This happened on March 26, 2024. The ship was called the Dali that ran into the bridge. This is the preliminary report issued today, a few hours ago. They say on March 26th, around 1:29 Eastern Daylight Time, the 947-foot-long Singapore-flagged cargo vessel container ship Dali was transiting out of Baltimore Harbor in Baltimore, Maryland, when it experienced a loss of electrical power and propulsion and struck the southern pier supporting the central truss spans of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. A portion of the bridge subsequently collapsed into the river, and portions of the deck and the truss spans collapsed onto the vessel's forward deck, right here. There you go. A 7-person road maintenance crew employed by Bronner Builders, which was contracted by the Maryland Transportation Authority, and 1 inspector employed by Ebron Enterprises, a subconsultant to the MTTA, were on the bridge when the vessel struck it. The inspector escaped unharmed, and 1 of the construction crew members survived with serious injuries. The bodies of the 6 fatally injured construction crew members have been recovered. So 6 construction workers died. Of the 23 persons aboard the Dali, 1 of the 23 persons aboard the Dali was injured. Then they say, yes, so terrible, as Jesse's girl says. Then they say the U.S. Coast Guard classified this accident as a major marine casualty. A major marine casualty may include any one of the following: the loss of 6 or more lives, the loss of blah, blah, blah. Well, it's a major marine casualty already because 6 or more lives were lost. Anyways, they say the NTSB is the lead federal agency for the safety investigation, and in response to the accident, traveled to Baltimore. As part of the investigative process, the NTSB invited qualified parties to participate in the investigation, and they talk about other parties that have been participating in the investigation. I'll skip over that. Fine. Okay. Accident events. So we're kind of just going through this report they released today, the preliminary report. Chris Vivid says, will the NTSB create any protocols from this? So what will they do about it? So I assume, Chris, that will wait until the full report, the full investigation, but maybe it says something about this at some point in here. Okay. The main propulsion system. The Dali was propelled by a single slow-speed diesel engine. Okay. I'm not going to read over every single word here. I actually will post the link again in the chat for people who want to see it. Link to report. Let's see here. So I'm just posing that there. I'll pin it there in one of the chats. If the Twitch mods want, they can pin it. Maybe I can pin it on Twitch as well. Maybe I can pin that on all of it. Can I do that here? Let's see here. Where is it here? I was trying to pin the link so it would just be there for everyone. There it is. Oh, why does it not let you pin it? I have pinned it on Facebook. I think I've pinned it on Facebook. Did I? That's weird. Let's see if this worked. That way it's just there and you can all read along if you want. Okay, it is pinned on Facebook now. Read along if you want. Oops. And I pinned it on YouTube. And I was trying to pin it on Twitch. There. I'm going to pin it. I pinned it on Twitch. I pinned it on everywhere. Okay. So you can go look at it. So it had one engine. The engine was directly connected to a single right-turning propeller. To run the main engine, one of the vessel's 4 diesel generators must be operating and supplying the vessel with electrical power. The emergency generator alone cannot be used to restart or run the main engine. The Dali's main engine required compressed air directed into its cylinders to start and change direction. To change from a head moving forward to a stern moving in reverse, the engine would need to be stopped and then restarted in the opposite direction. I assume these details are irrelevant, which is why I'm reading them all. The engine was also fitted with alarms and automatic shutdown features to prevent damage to the engine if supporting systems required for its operation, such as the lubricating oil pump or cooling water pump, were lost. If a loss of electrical power occurred to either of these pumps, the engine would be shut down automatically. As part of a multi-step sequence to restart and operate the main engine after a shutdown, the lubricating oil and cooling water pumps would need to be restarted. So what they're saying here is something to point out is if there's a loss of electrical power on the ship and that causes a loss of power to either the lubricating oil pump or the cooling water pump, then the engine will be shut down automatically. Furthermore, the emergency generator alone cannot restart the engine. So maybe something to keep in mind when you're thinking of like, well, why did it shut down? Why couldn't they restart it? I'm assuming that's the kind of thing they're talking about here. Let me just finish this next section and then we'll talk for a second. The ship's electrical power was supplied by 4 alternating current generators, which were each driven by a diesel engine. So there's the engine that drives the ship. And then each generator has its own engine. Okay, generators number 1 and 4 were blah, 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 blah. The generators were connected to a 6600 volt high voltage main electrical bus by the ship vessel's power management system that powered various shipboard equipment. Okay, fine. By the way, an electrical bus, just for those who don't know, because I'm not sure what it is. Electrical bus is, what is an electrical bus? A bus, let's see. I'm trying to get a simple definition. It's interesting. I'm trying to figure out like what is an electrical bus, and it's not easy to find simple definition. I'm trying to find a definition for people who like don't know anything about electricity. I don't know if there's a way to explain it very simply. I'm kind of looking around here on the internet, and I'm looking for like what's a simple definition of an electrical bus. Maybe you need to really know something about electricity to understand what it is. Some of our viewers are saying things like breaker box, fuse box. A bus is like a hub, fuse box, giant fuse. I'm not going to try. Breaker, it's power distribution. It's a circuit breaker. People saying some different things in our chat. Well, Schrodinger's cat says bus is just fancy for network, wires, breakers, switches, fuses, all the electrical stuff between a power source and ground. Anyways, I'm not going to worry about it right now. Maybe one of these channels where the people are like specialists in this kind of thing will talk about it. But one of our viewers said, look up bus bar. I'll look it up for a second. I don't want to get hung up on it. Yeah, I'm not sure, so I'm not going to worry about it. Let's see here. They're mentioning it, which is why I wanted to bring it up. We'll come back to it if we need it. But they just here talk about some of the detailed electrical setup on the ship. They say the ship had 4 generators, and each generator had its own engine. All right, so, and it gives some electrical specifics here. It's and we'll, if we need it, we'll come back to it. Okay. I don't want to get too. It won't really help you for me to get very tied up on electrical details when I'm not an electric specialist. Okay, and then. So if you know a lot about electricity, they have some very specific electrical details in here. I'm not going to, on an initial reading, stop on those, but you might be able to, understand some of the specifics. My goal is to kind of give you an overview of what's in here. All right. All right, let's keep going. I don't want to get hung up on that. Let's keep going. I'm going to take some more comments, but we'll keep going from that. Okay. Events of March 26th. The following timeline depicts the events that occurred in the time leading up to the Dali striking Pier 17 of the Key Bridge, right here. So the bridge's subsequent collapse and initial search and rescue and recovery efforts for the road maintenance crew members. So we have a timeline here. And again, I believe it left up here and it ran into the bridge here. Okay. Here's the timeline they give. Around midnight on March 26th, 7 road maintenance workers and 1 inspector were working in the southbound lanes of the Key Bridge, which were closed to traffic. Police units were stationed at either end of the bridge to alternate traffic on the northbound lanes to protect the construction crew. Around 12:05 a.m., a Maryland pilot, Association of Maryland Pilots, senior pilot and an apprentice pilot boarded the Dali, which was about to depart from here, Seagirt Marine Terminal, en route to Colombo, Sri Lanka, with a cargo of 4,680 containers. During the master pilot exchange, the senior pilot asked about the vessel's condition, and the captain reported the ship was in good working order. So I believe the idea is they have local pilots on the ship to initially get the ship out into the water. And then the local pilot eventually gets off when the ship's more in open water. That's my understanding of what happens. The Dali was assisted. A master pilot exchange is required at the start of pilot transits and includes discussion of the vessel's navigational equipment, any limitations of maneuverability, available engine speeds, berthing maneuvers, intended course and speed through the waterway, anticipated hazards along the route, weather conditions, and composition of the bridge team and deck crew, both forward and aft, including bow lookout. So something to notice here is when the local pilot got on the ship at around midnight and talked to the captain, the senior pilot asked about the vessel's condition, and the captain reported that the ship was in good working order. Was the ship in good working order? If it wasn't in good working order, should the captain have known that? Did the captain know that? Or should the captain have known that? Given that there was a blackout on the ship 10 hours before, roughly 10 hours before this incident, is there something the captain should have said there that he didn't say? I have no idea. But it's something to point out there for you. Okay? The Dali was assisted by 2 tugboats. Around 12:36 a.m., about an hour before the accident, the 2 tugboats pulled the Dali away from the dock. About a half an hour later, around 1:07 a.m., the vessel entered the Fort McHenry Channel. Generators numbers 3 and 4, 2 generators, were supplying electrical power to the vessel. All 3 steering pumps, which turned the ship's single rudder, were online. Okay, so they have, for you electric people, this is a simplified one-line electrical diagram of the Dali electrical power distribution system with circuit breakers. But they say that 2 generators were supplying power to the ship as of, roughly half an hour before the accident. Okay. We'll just, I'll look for some comments, but we're going to keep going through this timeline here. We're going through the timeline. By the way, our viewer GCC Damon says the question is, why did the breakers open? All right, let's keep going. So the ship is in the water. The 2 tugboats pulled the ship away from the dock. Around 12:45 a.m., the senior pilot ordered the main propulsion engine, diesel engine, driving a diesel engine driving a single propeller to dead slow ahead. Once in the channel, around 1:07 a.m., the senior pilot also gave orders for the tugboats to be let go per normal practice. So roughly 20 to 30 minutes before the accident, the senior pilot tells the tugboats, go away, we're fine, which is normal, okay? The senior pilot handed control over to the apprentice pilot and remained standing by. The ahead engine orders given during maneuvering would have generally corresponded to the estimated ship speeds in Figure 6. Fine. Okay, about 1:09 a.m., the main engine speed was increased to slow ahead. The apprentice pilot ordered a course of 141 degrees to go under the Key Bridge. Okay. Now this is right before the accident right here. Around 1:25 a.m., the Dali ship was 0.6 miles or 3 ship lengths from the Key Bridge when electrical circuit breakers HR and LR1 that fed most of the vessel's equipment and lighting unexpectedly opened. Let me read that again. This seems kind of important. Around 1:25 a.m., this is just before the power went out. Around 1:25 a.m., the Dali was 3 ship lengths from the bridge when electrical breakers HR1 and LR1 that fed most of the vessel's equipment and lighting unexpectedly opened, tripped. This caused the first blackout loss of electrical power to all shipboard lighting and most equipment, including the main engine cooling water pumps, which controlled engine cooling water pressure and steering gear pumps. So, I mean, first of all, that is really bad timing, right? That it was 3 ship lengths away from the bridge. So if it had been past the bridge, obviously it wouldn't have run into the bridge. And maybe if this happened a little while sooner, they would have had more time to do something. But this was 3 ship lengths before the bridge. Wickedest Witch says, and that dooms the ship to loss of power and what it was connected to. Giuseppe 3K says, surprised I didn't always use tugs until the vessel cleared the bridge. Yeah, I can't speak to that as to whether, that was advisable or not. It was the normal practice there. Okay. Yes, a GCC Damon says steering and water cooling were off to the engine because of the breakers. Remember, when these breakers opened, the main engine cooling water pumps stopped. And we read earlier that once those stop, didn't we read earlier that once the water cooling pumps stop, the engine will automatically stop? I think it said that. Let's see. Yes. If a loss of electrical power occurred to the cooling water pump, the engine would shut down automatically. So once those breakers opened, and the main cooling water pumps lost power, the engine was going to stop. All right, so the ship unexpectedly, the 2 electrical breakers, HR1 and LR1, that fed most of the vessel's equipment and lighting unexpectedly opened just 3 ship lengths before the key bridge. All right, so again, that caused the first blackout, loss of electrical power to all shipboard lighting and most equipment, including the main engine cooling water pumps, which controlled engine cooling water pressure and steering gear pumps. Then generator numbers 3 and 4 continued to run and supply electrical power to the HV bus. Most bridge equipment also lost power, and the voyage data recorder lost vessel system data feeds. So I guess maybe, I don't know if they don't have data after that from the voyage data recorder. Bridge audio continued to be captured. Okay. Oh, they have a diagram here. Let's keep going, then I'll go back to the diagram. Or let's look at here. So 1, a primary electrical. So there's the ship, and there's the bridge. So back here, 3 ship lengths before. 1, a primary electrical breaker that feeds most of the Dali's equipment and lighting unexpectedly opens, trips. The ship loses electrical power, experiencing a blackout. 2, right here. The main propulsion diesel engine shuts down automatically after the cooling pumps lost electrical power. The vessel loses its main propulsion here. Its propeller stops. The engine isn't going anymore. 3, crew restores electrical power to the vessel here. 4, call for tug assist. Senior pilot orders anchor dropped. 5, second blackout occurs here. 6, VHF marine radio call is made to warn all waterborne traffic. 7, the Dali hits the key bridge. We'll read a little more about this. But there's a little diagram there of kind of how fast this all happened. Aleppo says you can't steer a ship that's barely moving. Let's see. Let me read some more comments from you guys here. Our viewer, Chris McVeigh, says, I don't think the crew could have done anything to stop this once it started. They did act quickly, but the loss of the LV bus killed the engine. Those engines don't restart instantly, and they acted to drop anchor and get the rudder hard over. That's from our viewer, Chris McVeigh. Tracy Johnson thinks the ship company will be bankrupt after the big costs they have to pay. Well, I don't know if they have insurance and how that all works. Maybe, is there a world in which insurance pays, but their insurance rates go up? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Fatty Pneumonia says VDR lost data feeds. That's no good. So I'd be interested in this. It says that when the power first went out, the Voyage data recorder lost vessel system data feeds. So I haven't read through everything yet, but I wonder if they got those feeds back or not. Mr. Showtime says it won't be bankrupt. Derek Cooper says main breakers don't unexpectedly open. There has to be an obvious reason to trip those. So one good question that Derek brings up is that a couple of our viewers have mentioned is, how does this happen? How does it happen that all of a sudden the electrical breakers that feed most of the vessel's equipment and lighting unexpectedly open, causing a blackout to all shipboard lighting and most equipment, including the main engine cooling water pumps, which will automatically shut down the main engine? How does that happen? That I can't tell you. Okay, let's see here. Hang on one moment. We are going through the preliminary report by the NTSB on the bridge collapse after the ship hit it in Baltimore in late March, and I have pinned the link to the report to the top of the chat so you can look at it yourself. And I'm taking your comments and questions as we go through this. Jeffy, our viewer, says, if it's really no different than your house, if you trip a breaker, your lights then go out. By the way, according to Wikipedia, a circuit breaker is an electrical safety device designed to protect an electrical circuit from damage caused by current in excess of that which the equipment can safely carry. Its basic function is to interrupt current flow, to protect equipment, and to prevent fire. Unlike a fuse, which operates once and then must be replaced, a circuit breaker can be reset to resume normal operation. So, the power went out on the ship right before the bridge when two electrical breakers, HR1 and LR1, unexpectedly opened. Why did they open? I don't know. We'll see if it says anything more in here about that specifically. Some of our viewers say it was intentional. So I don't believe any kind of evidence has been cited for intentional sabotage or something, but we'll go through and see if they have anything more to say about this. All right. So, but remember, these circuit breakers, just something to point out here. We'll talk about this in a second, but these so we'll get to this again in a second. We talked about this earlier. But the two circuit breakers that were being used and unexpectedly opened, they were not originally the ones that were going to be used, but there were two power blackouts on the ship about 10 hours before it left port. And when those happened on the ship, I believe the crew switched it from two other circuit breakers that had been in use for months to these two circuit breakers. We read that already. We'll go over that again. As to what that all means in terms of why this happened and stuff, whether that factored into it, I don't know. But it is interesting that the circuit breakers that unexpectedly opened were these two circuit breakers that were like newly in use on the ship. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's keep going. So we're going through the timeline here, and we're talking about how the ship has lost power initially, And it said that after the ship lost power, generators 3 and 4 on the ship, there's a generator for the main engine, and then there's 4 other generators on the ship to supply power. And those 2 of those generators were still running, okay? It says here the main propulsion diesel engine was independent of the vessel's 4 diesel-driven electrical generators. However, but the loss of electrical power to the pumps required for its operation resulted in the main engine being automatically shut down, and the vessel lost main propulsion, meaning its propeller stopped. That's why the vessel stopped moving or stopped being propelled, even though it still had 2 generators working. The loss of electrical power stopped all 3 steering pumps. Therefore, the rudder was unable to be moved. At the time, the ship was on a heading of 141.7, and it gives some details about where the ship was going. But when the power went out, they couldn't move the rudder, and no propeller movement. At 1:26:02, the voyage data recorder, which had stopped... Oh, look at this. The voyage data recorder, which had stopped recording vessel system data when the blackout occurred, then resumed recording data. The VDR audio recording had not been affected by the blackout. All right, it talks about the heading here being different than it was shortly before, 144.3. The speed had dropped from 9 knots to 8.6 knots. The apprentice pilot called the pilot dispatcher by mobile phone. At 11 seconds later, so about 1 minute after the power went out, the apprentice pilot, or within a minute after the power went out, roughly speaking, the apprentice pilot called the pilot dispatcher, and then 10 seconds after that, about the senior pilot who had regained control from the apprentice pilot ordered 20 degrees of port rudder. So it's interesting that the senior pilot is ordering them, I think, to move the rudder, even though they didn't have power to move the rudder. I don't know if the senior pilot realized that at the time. According to the crew, the emergency generator started and connected to the emergency bus. Its breaker would have closed shortly after the vessel lost electrical power. At this time, the NTSB is still investigating the exact time when the emergency generator started and connected to the emergency bus. Typical for ocean-going vessels, the Dali had an emergency diesel generator in addition to the 4 generators that could be configured to automatically start and connect to the emergency bus if normal electrical power and lighting were lost. When the emergency bus was powered, emergency lighting, navigation and radio equipment, alarms, and other emergency equipment would have been available. And the designated emergency steering pump would have been available to turn the rudder at its low speed setting. Okay. So maybe the pilot knew the emergency generator had kicked in and there'd be some steering ability. When operated alone using emergency electrical power, steering pump number 3 was designed to run at lower speed, turning the rudder at a slower rate than with all the pumps. However, without one of our viewers said something like this: without the propeller turning, the rudder would have been less effective. Okay, interesting. The crew manually closed those 2 important circuit breakers that had opened, cutting off a lot of the power to the ship. So the crew then closes those 2 circuit breakers, reconnecting generator numbers 3 and 4, and restoring electrical power to the LV bus, supplying electrical power again to the entire vessel. So the power goes out, and within 2 minutes, it looks like, they have the power restored, right? Because around 1:25, the 2 electrical breakers unexpectedly opened, causing a loss of power to most of the vessel's equipment and lighting. So within 2 minutes, they have closed the breakers, and the whole vessel again has power. Okay, what happens then? At 1:26:39, the pilots called for tug assist. One tug was 3 miles away and immediately answered, heading toward the ship. That tug did not reach the ship in time. At 1:27:01, the senior pilot ordered an anchor dropped, and this is just 2 minutes after it initially lost power, and the crew began to process to drop anchor. The pilot's dispatcher called the Maryland MDTA police duty officer and relayed that the ship had lost power. The pilot's dispatcher then notified the Coast Guard about the Dali's loss of power. Okay, so they've gotten the power back pretty quickly, it looks like. And then it says, the Dali crew was able to restore electrical power to the vessel. But when the ship was 0.2 miles from the bridge, remember, the ship only was 3.6 miles, aka 3 ship lengths from the bridge when it first lost power. So now they've managed to restore power to the ship, but when the ship was 0.2 miles from the bridge, I think like 1 ship length away, a second electrical blackout occurred because DGR-3 and DGR-4, the breakers that connected electric generators number 3 and 4 to the HV bus opened, causing a total loss of vessel electrical power, HV bus and LV bus. Having connected to the emergency bus by this time, the emergency generator provided electrical power to the emergency equipment continuously throughout the second electrical blackout. Generator number 2, which had previously started automatically because it was in standby mode, connected and restored power to the HV bus via DGR2. At 1:27:23, the pilot ordered the rudder hard to port. At this point, the main engine remained shut down and there was no propulsion to assist with steering. At 1:27:25, one of the pilots made a call by very high-frequency marine radio to warn all waterborne traffic. And again, 1:27:25 is only about 2.5 minutes after the initial power went off. At 1:27:32, about 31 seconds after the second blackout, the crew manually closed breakers HR2 and LR2, restoring power to the LV bus, which was powered by generator number 2. The crew regained electrical power before the vessel struck the pier, but was unable to regain propulsion. So the ship never got propulsion back. At 1:27:53, the MDTA officer, which is MDTA Maryland, Maryland Transportation Authority officer, duty officer, ordered the units stationed at the ends of the bridge to close the bridge to all traffic. Once the bridge was closed to traffic, only the maintenance crew and the inspector remained on the bridge. That happened at... Okay, so this is actually interesting. The bridge was closed to traffic about 1 minute and 17 seconds before the ship hit the bridge. It was that amount of time. Again, the bridge was ordered. The order went out to close the bridge to traffic 1 minute and 17 seconds before the ship struck the bridge. So this is how fast this all happened. And again, that order went out around 3 minutes after the ship lost power for the first time. So, I mean, you know, it's not like all of this took a long time. It just shows you how fast this was all happening. And then, as we'll see, from the time the ship lost power at 1:25 for the first time to the ship striking the bridge was about a little over 4 minutes, it looks like. So this all happens very fast. You know, just so people know, it's not like it was for an hour drifting or even like 10 minutes drifting through the water. And then, you know, when you wonder, like, why couldn't they get the people off, the workers off the bridge, which is a great question, but, you know, something to keep in mind here is this is all happening very fast. Okay. Kevin Fortson said Murphy had a heyday on this one. You know, it's just this we talked about this before, and certainly I'm not an expert on all this stuff, but one thing I did say is it looks like the timing here was incredibly unfortunate because the ship was just 3 ship lengths before the bridge when the power went out. And if it had just made it past that bridge, then it's obviously not going to hit the bridge. And I don't know, maybe if it happened, first of all, if it happened a little before this, maybe they would have had time to get the people off the bridge, right? But it happened so close. The power was lost just about 4 minutes before the ship hit the bridge. So it just really happened right before it got to the bridge. All right, I'm gonna just finish this timeline and then we'll talk for a second. But it's interesting to see this timeline. So again, the bridge is closed to traffic around 3 minutes after the power goes out on the bridge on the chip, and at around 1 minute and 17 seconds after the bridge was closed to traffic, about 4 minutes after the power first went out on the ship, the Dali's starboard bow struck Pier 17 of the Key Bridge, moving at 6.5 knots. 6 spans of the bridge, the main spans 17, 18, and 19, and spans 20, 21, and 22, subsequently collapsed into the water and across the ship's bow. A Dali crew member who was on the bow at the time of the incident, told investigators that as he was releasing the brake on the port anchor, he had to escape from the falling bridge before he was able to reapply the brake. Due to ongoing salvage efforts, the amount of anchor chain pulled out is still unknown. All right, so he was releasing the brake. So is the idea that so not that this matters at this point, but I don't know if it matters. But so he's letting out the anchor. And as he's letting out the anchor, all this stuff starts falling towards him. He's standing there on the bow of the boat and he has to run away, and then he can't reapply the brake to the anchor. Although remember, at that point, the ship had already hit the bridge, right? So, so maybe there's excess chain. Maybe there's more chain that's been let out than you would normally expect because he never reapplied the brake. But that's crazy. I actually want to post that. The NTSB preliminary report about the Baltimore bridge collapse released today says one of the ship's crew members was on the bow operating the anchor when the bridge started falling onto the bow, and had to escape the falling bridge. Wow. Crazy. I'm going to actually post this. Oh, and another crew member escaped. Another crew member was on, as the bridge deck collapsed onto the bow of the Dali, another of the vessel's crew member sustained a minor injury while escaping the debris. That's interesting. Anyways, So again, that's really pretty crazy. Yeah, Robertson says they're so lucky. And a second crew member sustained a minor injury while escaping the debris. So it looks like 2 crew members were actually standing on the bow of the ship. I mean, it's lucky that they weren't killed. But he was literally operating the anchor, and he had to run. Basically, it looks like he had to run away or something. Oh, now, Mona says all the anchor chain will be on the seabed. Is that true? Because he didn't have time. How does the anchor work? So he was dropping the anchor, and there's an anchor brake, but he wasn't able to reapply the brake because he had to run away from the debris. So does the anchor does the rest of the chain just fall into the sea? Or wasn't the anchor still connected to the ship, or does it just run until the end? Wasn't the anchor chain hanging down? Oh, Aleppo says it's not that deep there. Maybe it stops when the anchor hits. I don't know. Yeah, Hakusho says the anchor could get stuck on the seafloor. Aleppo says it's connected. But that also shows you, like that's how sudden it was. He was operating this anchor and to try to get the ship stopped, and he literally didn't have time to reapply the brake to it because the bridge started falling down. Yeah, American Restoration says only 50 feet of watching. All right, let's finish the timeline here. Okay, again, I have posted the link to this report. It is pinned to the top of the chat on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, so you can open it up yourself. By the way, thanks to Janet Burnett for the gift memberships, and also thanks to Chris Vivid for becoming a member. And I want to just thank our moderators who are here. Ruth Krafasi is moderating. Thank you, Ruth. RJ. And Papa Bear, David Green, Big Ball of Yarn, Kay Lowry Body, Margaret Riley, thanks for modding. And thanks to Tander62 and Hopper for subscribing on Twitch, and Jackson22 as well. We're going to talk, so in case you missed it before, we're about to get to the section where they talk about the power going on in the ship, out of the ship, like 10 hours before it left port. But let's just finish this timeline here. So, as we mentioned, about 4 minutes after the ship first lost power, they actually restored power to the ship, but they weren't able to, so the power goes out on the ship. They managed to restore power to the ship. Then there's a second blackout on the ship. And there was an emergency generator going, but they never got propulsion back. And about 4 minutes after the power first went out, the ship struck one of the piers of the bridge. A crew member who was operating the anchor had to flee, it looks like, and didn't even have time to reapply the anchor brake. And another crew member on the bow had a minor injury while escaping the debris. So at least 2 crew members were on the bow of the ship when the stuff came down on it. The road maintenance inspector, who I think is the one who didn't get injured, the road maintenance inspector had been walking the length of the bridge when the ship struck it. He ran north and made it to the nearest surviving span. Wow, before the rest of the bridge collapsed. Unbelievable. Wow, unbelievable. Can you believe that? Crazy. He made it to the nearest surviving span. The nearest surviving span. That is unbelievable. Yeah, he ran for his life, said Xylee. He literally is running. And after he runs on, and eventually, like, the bridge falls behind him. Yeah, it's like Mr. Bigley says, stuff you see in a movie. Haley says, sounds like something out of an action movie. Yeah, it really happened. Loreddit says he was he was on it as it was slowly falling. I mean, maybe so. Christy Claff says he will never look at life the same again. He is the one of the 8 people on the bridge at the time, the 8 crew members, of that 8-person work crew that didn't get injured. 6 of them died, and one had was seriously injured. Is that what it said? That's page 12, by the way. It says. I think they were the only ones on the bridge at the time. Yes. A 7-person maintenance crew and 1 inspector were on the bridge when the vessel struck it. The inspector, in case, escaped unharmed by running away, and 1 of the construction crew members survived with serious injuries. The 6 other people died. Condolences to their families, by the way. But that is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Yep, Marissa Puglia says he is very lucky. Louis R. says, that is insane. I had not heard that detail before. Puff Adder says, all just trying to earn a living. Wow. Okay, we'll keep going here. I mean, these reports, sometimes you just find these details in them. I hadn't even seen that part of the report before. Wow. The other 7 workers were in their vehicles and fell with the bridge. 1 worker was able to free himself from his truck and was rescued by a MDTA police boat at 0155. Okay, I don't know if maybe we'd heard that detail before. I don't know if we had. I'm going to post this. When the Baltimore bridge collapsed, 7 workers in their vehicles fell into the water. Though one of them who survived was able... It doesn't really... You know what? Actually, I'm sorry. You know what's interesting here? It doesn't actually say they fell into the water. It says the other 7 workers were in their vehicles and fell with the bridge. 1 worker was able to free himself from his truck. Now, where was the... Did he somehow manage to free himself from his truck before it hit the water? Or so, I can't say. But it's interesting. He did fall in his truck, and he survived, and the others didn't. So I don't know if that's just dumb luck. Yeah, Louis R. says he was pulled from the water. Is that what? I think that's right, Louis. I think I remember hearing that. Amy 2 Asia said the truck went in the water, and did he crank the windows? For all I know, he gave an interview and he explained this. I don't remember a reading about it. So maybe some of you have seen or heard this. I don't know if he's given a detailed interview saying exactly how that all went down. But definitely the bridge collapsed. The 7 vehicles fell. Not 7. The 7 people fell in their vehicles, and he was able to free himself from his truck. I'm a Silly Girl says audio with cops after said he was in the water. Chris McVeigh says, watching the recording of the collapse, now all those videos ended up in the water. So, maybe, who knows? What can I say? Maybe the other ones hit the water hard and they lost consciousness or something. I don't know. But, fortunately for that one person, he was able to get out of that truck. Amy 2 Asia said he wants to speak to the public about it, but he can't right now. I don't believe, by the way, I might be wrong about this. How about the guy, the inspector, who was literally running off the bridge and made it to the nearest surviving span before the rest of the bridge collapsed? I haven't heard an interview with him. I wonder if he's talked to anybody. Kate Rose says they fell with the deck of the bridge. The top portions of the bridge fell. Large steel pieces fell on top of the deck in the trucks. So maybe he just somehow, he had serious injuries, but maybe somehow he got lucky in a way that the others didn't. Amra says, I want to hear what the survivor says. 2 survivors, him and the inspector who ran off the bridge, that ran off the part that was falling. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's finish up the timeline part here. Yeah, I think the crew still is on the ship. Maybe they'll talk about that here, so I don't want to, take too much time talking about that right now. Yes, the crew is still on the ship. The crew is still on the ship because I'm reading an article from yesterday that talks about the crew still being on the ship when they did the demolition. Okay. All right. Let's keep going with the timeline here. So in that, by the way, it's interesting. That worker who freed himself from his truck was rescued by a police boat 26 minutes after the collapse. How about that? So the collapse, the ship hit the bridge at 1:29 a.m. and the worker who was in the water, who freed himself from his truck, was rescued at 1:55 a.m. So 26 minutes later. Wow. Interesting. Okay, just finishing up this timeline here. Uncle Floyd says, cold water, very scary. Fatty says he must have been in bad shape. Always chasing rain says, how scary. All right, about 1:34, the Coast Guard issued an urgent marine information broadcast requesting assistance from passing traffic. The first Coast Guard boats were on the scene about 1:51, about 22 minutes after the collapse. Multiple agencies searched for survivors. The Coast Guard suspended the active search that evening in efforts then transitioned recovery. 6 victims were later recovered by divers. So one thing I don't know, and maybe, I don't know if the authorities have spoken to this, is there a chance that if another boat happened to be right there, that they could have saved any more people? Is there a world in which somebody was seriously injured and they could barely hold themselves up and then they just fell? I don't know. I don't know the circumstances of the other 6. So the first Coast Guard boats were on scene at 1:51. The police boat picked up the survivor at 1:55. So, I don't know if there were other, given that the survivor was picked up 26 minutes after the bridge collapsed. I'm not blaming anyone here. I'm sure they got there as fast as they could, but I don't know if anyone, initially survived and wasn't able to make it. If Fatty says it's a long time in cold water and people could have been seriously injured. Always chasing the rain says you don't last long in cold water. Stanley says we don't know. Yeah, but anyways. Cherry Sour says the survivor was very lucky to survive. Matthew says the other 6 were recovered by divers. Yeah, again, I don't know what their exact circumstance was. I do know that they fell in their trucks. Okay. Let's go. All right. So we talked about the timeline here. If you're joining us late, this preliminary report about the NTSB's preliminary report about the Baltimore bridge collapse has been released this afternoon. We're just going through it and talking about it. They're still investigating, but there's some interesting details in here. If you missed the first part, you can rewind, but also I have posted the link to the document at the top of the chat, and you can open it yourself and go through it. Roberson says, must have been swimming with injuries, the survivor, and no flotation device too. Unless they found something that floated, I don't know. Carrie West said the remaining fatalities were found inside their trucks. Is that true? Maybe it is true. I'm not sure. Lewis R. says, I believe the other 6 were pulled from the vehicles they were in, but so they never got out of their truck, but I'm not positive on that. Some of our viewers are saying they were found inside the trucks. Tom Smith said the survivor in the water most likely would have had hypothermia. Okay, so let's now. So we talked about the timeline, and now just go over some of the other things they talk about here. And if it's really like dry, we'll just kind of skip it. But we're going to talk about the blackout on the ship about 10 hours before it left port. Hey, thanks, Baronico. I appreciate it, Baronico. Thank you. Okay. The Dali, it is a cargo ship. It was built in 2015. Fine. Singapore-based Grace Ocean Private Limited. The vessel's owner owns 55 ships. The vessel manager is Synergy Marine Group that manages 55 ships. The ship, since arriving from Sri Lanka, the ship had been to Newark, New Jersey from March 19th to March 21st, and Norfolk, Virginia from March 22th to March 22nd to March 23rd. It arrived in Baltimore on March 23rd. The accident occurred on March 26th. Okay, so this is this thing we went to right at the beginning because I wanted to highlight it. But let's talk about this again. Electrical power loss on previous days. So I have seen a bunch of headlines about this. So this talks about how the ship lost power before leaving port 10 hours before it left port, right here. Okay? By the way, our viewer American Restoration says it's simply amazing not more died. Yeah, it's really fortunate that more cars weren't on the bridge at the time. And as I mentioned, the bridge was ordered closed to traffic only about a minute before the ship hit the bridge. They just didn't have that much time. It all happened very fast. Okay, it says here about 10 hours before leaving Baltimore. Hang on a second here. About 10 hours before leaving Baltimore, the ship experienced a blackout, loss of electrical power to the LV and LV buses during in-port maintenance. And then the NTSB is not aware that there's any other blackouts the ship had in the U.S. for the previous few days. Now, this is really kind of strange. Why did this blackout happen on the ship 10 hours before it left port? Well, while working on the diesel engine exhaust scrubber system for the diesel engine driving the only online generator number 2, a crew member mistakenly closed an inline engine exhaust damper. Closure of this damper effectively blocked the engine cylinder exhaust gases from traveling up its stack and out of the vessel, causing the engine to stall. When the system detected a loss of power, generator 3 automatically started and connected to the HV bus. So, how bad a mistake is this? How might this have contributed to the ship eventually losing power 10 hours later when it's in the water? I don't know. How big of a mess up is this by this crew member? That I don't know. But again, the power going out 10 hours before the ship left port was not some kind of equipment failure. It was due to a crew member mistake. Barry says, wow, again, just wow. I don't know how often these kind of crew member mistakes happen, so I can't speak to this. And I can't speak to the exact connection, if any, between this power outage and the ship eventually losing power. What I will say is this, though, and it says this, that what happened, what basically happens here is 10 hours before, to try to sum things up, 10 hours before the ship leaves port, it has two blackouts. It has one, and then it seems like the second one follows from that. And then after those two blackouts, they switch which circuit breakers they're using from the two they'd been using to months to two different circuit breakers, okay? And then it turns out that when the ship lost power when it's in the water just before the bridge, it lost power because those two circuit breakers that were newly in use unexpectedly opened. So, you know, if the crew member never did this, is it the case that there would have been no blackout? It seems like if the crew member never did it, there would not have been this initial blackout on the ship. If there hadn't been these initial two blackouts on the ship before leaving port, would they have kept using the original two circuit breakers, and would those have been fine? And then this would have never happened? I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there. Okay? But again, so the reason there was an initial blackout 10 hours before leaving Baltimore is a crew member made a mistake and closed something they shouldn't have closed. Then crew members manually closed two circuit breakers. And the crew members restore power after that initial blackout 10 hours before it's leaving the port, caused by the crew member mistake. And generator 3 continued to run for a short period, but insufficient fuel pressure caused its speed to decrease, and its breaker opened. A second blackout, another loss of electrical power to the HV and LV buses occurred. In the meantime, the crew had reopened generator number 2's engine exhaust damper, and the generator automatically restarted and then connected to the HV bus when DGR2 closed. So there were two blackouts, the second that followed from the first, it looks like. And then, while recovering from the second blackout, 10 hours before the ship left port, the crew switched the bus configuration to use breakers HR1 and LR1 and the bus's associated transformer TR1 instead of breakers HR2 and LR2, which had been in use for several months. TR1 and its associated breakers HR1 and LR1 were in use when the ship departed on March 26th, and I will call your attention to the fact that when the ship lost power shortly before hitting the bridge, how did it lose power? When it lost power shortly before hitting this bridge, when the electrical breakers HR1 and LR1 unexpectedly tripped. So I don't know what to make of all this, but again, for months they had not been using breakers HR1 and LR1. They'd been using two other breakers, but they switched when they were recovering to these new breakers, these newly used breakers, when they were recovering from the two blackouts 10 hours before they left, and those two breakers were what resulted, unexpectedly opening up was what resulted in the blackout right before it hit the bridge. Okay? I know it's a little confusing, but I just want to make it clear what we're seeing here. Okay. Let's see here. The first in-port blackout was caused by the mechanical blocking of the online generator's exhaust gas stack, which happened when a crew member mistakenly closed something. The second blackout in port was related to insufficient fuel pressure for the online generator. I can't really speak to that. during both of these electrical power loss events, the online generators, breakers, DGR2 and GGR3 to the HV bus open before the HR2 and or LR2 breakers open. During the recovery, the crew put TR1 online to feed the LV bus because TR2 had reportedly been in use for several months. Again, I don't understand all this stuff. I'm sure there will be ship experts and electrical experts and ship engine experts who do videos talking about this, which I'll try to watch. But just trying to go through here and summarize this on a basic level, this report. Yeah, the first vessel blackout after departure occurred when the newly in use breakers HR1 and LR1 opened unexpectedly. The NTSB is still investigating the electrical configuration following the first in-port blackout and potential impacts on the events during the action voyage. So that's pretty important right there. What does that tell you? You know, you look at this and you think, oh, it must have been a connection between this first blackout, the two blackouts that happened 10 hours before it left port, and the loss of power that happened right before it hit the bridge, right? It seems like reasonable to think there might be some connection there. But then whether there's a connection and what the exact nature is, they are still investigating that. It says it right there. The NTSB is still investigating the electrical configuration following the first in-port blackout and potential impacts on the events during the accident voyage. So that is something they are looking into. I'm going to take some more comments now, and then we'll kind of finish going through this. I talked about the bridge some a little bit, so we'll talk about that. Fatty says, I'm interested in the data recording going out. The data recorder went out, and then it came back online. I don't know how much data was missed, but it did say in the timeline that the data recorder went out when power went out, but then it came back online. Yes, at 1:25 when power initially went out, the voyage data recorder lost vessel system data feeds. But then it says about a minute later, the VDR, which had stopped recording vessel system data when the blackout occurred, resumed recording the data. What it lost for that minute, I don't know. There's a section here about the VDR. We'll look at that in a second. Paul Dickerson says, sounds like replacement circuit breakers were faulty. So it's an interesting thought from Paul. Again, I do not know about ship engines. I'm not an electrician. But what I do know from the report is they were using 2 circuit breakers on the ship. They had a couple blackouts 10 hours before the ship left port. They switched to use it, and they were using those couple circuit breakers for months. Then when recovering from the 2 blackouts on the ship, that happened before it left port, they switched to 2 other circuit breakers, and then the ship lost power shortly before the bridge when the 2 other circuit breakers that were newly in use unexpectedly opened. So was there some sort of issue with the 2 newly in use circuit breakers? Don't know, no idea. Maybe an expert would say, no, that's ridiculous. So I'm not an expert on these things. But I understand why our viewer is saying that. Uncle Floyd says maybe they were faulty or not suitable as substitutes. Shweddy says you would think a data recorder would have its own power source. It is interesting that the power on the data recorder did go out for like a minute or so, it seems like. And why, is there something else I could have done that would be reasonable to keep it going in that kind of eventuality? Our viewer GCC Damon says, I agree with Paul. They probably had the wrong... let me read this comment here. Sorry, I have to go here and read this. I want to get the comment right. Where is it here? They probably had the wrong power rating on them. So if I'm not misinterpreting you, I think a couple of our viewers are saying they think that there was some sort of issue with the breakers that were put into use because the 2 breakers that had been used, they switched the breakers right before taking off because there was the 2 blackouts on board 10 hours before. Look, I'm sure that's something they're looking into, the NTSB. Is there anything in the report about contaminated fuel, says Nick Sutton? We're going to get to they talk about fuel coming up. So there's a little here about fuel. American Restoration says this was just a horrible chain of events in a small, unforgiving area. Like, is it possible, again, amateur throwing out a possibility here. First of all, it seems like this was very unfortunate timing because the ship lost power just 3 ship lengths before the bridge, and it took 4 minutes between the time the ship lost power till the time it hit the bridge. So it could have lost the bridge, shortly later, and then it would have been past the bridge. It could have lost power a little bit later, would have been past the bridge. Maybe could have lost power earlier, and then you could have gotten the people off the bridge, and something else could have been done for the ship or something. But is it possible that in addition to that unfortunate timing, is it the case that there was something wrong with, like, some of our viewers are saying, well, maybe something was wrong with these circuit breakers they started using after the power blackout on the ship 10 hours before it took off. If that power blackout never happened, I guess my point is, was there something wrong with those new circuit breakers that just hadn't been checked or something? And would that have been, is that something that was just nobody knew about it on the ship and it was just unfortunate they didn't know about it? But you would think that if you're using something on a ship that it would be checked. So again, I'm just throwing things out there, but if there was something wrong with the new circuit breakers or something wrong with the new electric setup, maybe I would think maybe the crew didn't realize that. Should they have known that? I have no idea, so. Chris McVeigh says, just so folks know, breakers can sometimes just trip. Rare, but it happens. A fault might not be apparent until it suddenly fails. Seen it happen at sea or on an aircraft carrier. That wasn't a fun day for me. I was a casualty responder, but nobody got hurt, luckily. If we were pulling into or out of port, it could have been worse. Accidents suck, and sometimes there's no way to prevent them. Until we know more, we just don't know. Thanks, Chris. Latu says the circuit breakers most likely are very big ones, like 1 meter by 1 meter, not like you may find at home. Maybe there was some other issue with the ship that they didn't realize, which somehow wouldn't have mattered until they changed circuit breakers. I have no idea. They're going to talk, Barry says when the bridge was built, the ports in Baltimore Harbor weren't usable by these huge container ships. I think the ships weren't as big when the bridge was first built, but we're going to talk about the bridge coming up. They talk about that. Marie thinks they never should have left the port. Gray thinks the data recorder shouldn't have stopped because it should have its own bank of batteries. Right, so Totally Scuffed says breakers blow because of a power surge, so maybe the underlying issue kept destroying the breakers. Right, so maybe the breakers were working fine, but there was some other issue that they never fixed, right? So power did go out. Another obvious question, power did go out 10 hours before the ship left the port. Did they adequately? Well, we know why power went out the first time. Power went out the first time because, according to the report, a crew member mistakenly closed something they were not supposed to close. But this question then happens, which is like, did something happen to the ship during those first the first 2 blackouts 10 hours before? Did something happen to the ship that the crew didn't realize? Did the crew do everything that they were supposed to do to check the ship after those power outages? Is there something that should have been checked on that ship after those 2 power outages 10 hours before the ship left port that wasn't checked, that should have been caught? Should the ship have left port? All good questions. I can't tell you. But our viewer Paul Wildigo says they probably used the wrong breakers with less power than the power they were using and overloaded with power that the breakers could not handle the power and they tripped. So, interesting possibilities people are talking about. As I've said 100 times, I'm not an expert. I'm not offering you what happened, but interesting thoughts from our viewers. Okay, so let's keep going here. And talk about some of the stuff they talk about in the rest of the report. We're going through this report. Hold on one moment. We are going through the newly released NTSB preliminary report on the Baltimore bridge collapse. I have pinned the report to the top of the chat so you can look at it, you can download it, read it all you want. We're taking your comments on the air as we go through it. Reading your comments on the air. And I do want to say a quick thank you to our moderators. We have moderating right now Big Ball of Yarn, David Green, McBritches, Papa Bear, Sharon C54, and Margaret Riley, Kay Lowry Body, Christina Neal, Paul Anderson, and Kinetic, Ruth Krafasi. Very much appreciate all of our moderators. RJ. And as I said, maybe it's a little bit more of a dry stream than we usually do. I mean, we are reading through a report, but I think it's important. I think it's interesting to see what this report is. And, sometimes with these reports, they have these important details. We've seen some very interesting details that you don't really see unless you actually read through it. So we're reading through it together. If you don't want to read through it, you don't have to watch, but that's what we're doing. We're reading through it together and talking about it. Okay, so we're getting towards the latter part of the report here. And if there's something that's like super technical, I'm just not going to do it. So we talked about electrical power loss 10 hours before. We talked about that whole section. Okay, Voyage data recorder. International Maritime Organization rules require that 3,000 of these kind of vessels contain both a fixed and float-3 VDR capsule that can record at a minimum 48 hours of data. The VDR should store internal data of at least 30 days in the VDR's cabinet. 6 hours of VDR data, which tracked events immediately before and after the accident, were downloaded and reviewed on March 26, immediately following the casualty. The VDR's hard drive from the VDR cabinet was removed and downloaded. The hard drive contained 34 days of data. All right, so they got a bunch of data here. Other data from other bridge equipment, including the ship's electronic chart display and information system, and the pilot's portable pilot unit were also downloaded. Review of the data continues. They are still reviewing data. Okay. Here's going to be something kind of technical. Integrated control and monitoring system and high voltage electrical bus. The Dali was equipped with an integrated control and monitoring system that retained information related to machinery and system changes, okay, and resulting alarms, including vessel engines in the electrical power management system. The NTSB has managed testing of the vessel's HV electrical bus and its components, including the HV and LV breakers, as the investigation parties and the electrical bus manufacturer work to identify the cause of the breakers unexpectedly opening while approaching the key bridge and subsequent blackouts. So it says here that the parties to the investigation and the electrical bus manufacturer are working currently to identify the cause or causes of the circuit breakers unexpectedly opening and cutting power to the ship, or most of the ship, while approaching the key bridge and the subsequent blackouts. All right? It says that. Alcohol and other drug testing. Coast Guard regulations require employers to conduct drug and alcohol testing for those directly involved in a serious marine accident. On March 26th, the night of the ship accident, about an hour after the ship crashed into the bridge, the Dali master and chief engineer tested the entire crew for alcohol per company procedure. All of them tested negative. At 3:17, the senior and apprentice pilots, the local pilots who were relieved by another pilot from the Association of Maryland Pilots. The two pilots who'd been piloting the ship out of Baltimore, the local pilots, were taken ashore where they were both administrated drug and alcohol tests. Both tested negative. Between roughly 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. the next day, a third-party testing provider went aboard the ship to test the entire crew for alcohol and drugs. All tested negative for both. The injured crew member who had been tested with the rest of the crew had already been taken ashore for medical treatment and was not tested by the third-party testing provider. Okay. So, a lack of any kind of positive drug or alcohol tests, as you can see. All right. Jane Jones says no one was drunk or on drugs. It looks like it from the testing, but they did put that in there. So you can see that. Hakusho says crew tested sober. And the local pilot and assistant pilot. Local pilot and apprentice pilot. Okay, fuel testing. Now, we had seen there had been some reports floating around that maybe something with the fuel might have contributed to this. So let's see what they say about fuel testing. The ship used three main grades of fuel for the main engine and electrical generators. It talks about the specific grades. The Dali casket carried an estimated 1.8 million gallons of fuel in its dedicated fuel tanks. None of the fuel tanks were damaged. The last time the crew switched fuel was on March 21st, 5 days before the accident, when they switched to burning low-sulfur marine gas oil in all engines upon entering U.S. territorial waters as required by emission regulatory requirements. So the ship switched what fuel it was using on March 21st. The Dali took on various amounts of all three types of fuel in Newark, New Jersey, a week before the crash. Fuel sample analysis results indicated that the LSG-MGO fuel bunkered in Newark, which was the same type of fuel in use during the accident events, complied with international standards and regulations. The test results did not identify any concerns related to the quality of fuel. Okay? On March 28th, the owner took samples of the fuel that was being burned at the time of the accident. An independent lab tested that. The test results did not identify any concerns related to the quality of fuel. On April 11th, additional fuel samples were taken from all fuel tanks and various fuel supply manifolds on board the vessel. Samples were tested by an independent lab. Fuel sample analysis results indicated the fuel being burned at the time of the accident complied with international standards and regulations. The test results did not identify any concerns related to the quality of fuel. So, in sum, testing suggests that fuel was not, the problems with fuel there were no problems with the fuel. I'm going to post that because there had been some reports flying around saying that like they were looking into whether there was some kind of fuel impurities. NTSB report says on Baltimore bridge says there is no indication anything was wrong with the ship's fuel. That's interesting. Roberson thinks fuel quality seems irrelevant given the chain of events they stated. Junior Prusky says, so no fuel problem, then what was it? Again, I can't say for sure there was no fuel problem, but it's certainly the testing makes it look like. What we can say is the testing hasn't revealed any kind of problem with the fuel that we can see. Melissa Terry says, fuel people can relax. All right. Oh, they talk about hazardous materials yet. I think they said there's been no hazardous material leak, but I'll talk about that. Let's see here. DJC Mobile Tech is monitoring as well, by the way. All right, we'll keep going here. We'll keep going. Let's see here. As Aleppo Gambit pointed out, also none of the fuel tanks were damaged. Hazardous materials. There had been talk that maybe there had been some hazardous material leakage. Hazardous materials, of the 4680 containers on board of the vessel at the time, 56 were identified as containing dangerous goods, hazardous materials. Those containers were located throughout the ship. The NTSB identified 14 containers, which were recorded as containing hazardous materials that may have been damaged when the ship struck the bridge or during the subsequent collapse of the bridge deck onto the ship. These 14 ships' containers were all located forward of the superstructure. So they actually have a map here, a diagram, approximate locations of cargo bays, yellow, in the yellow with numbers and white squares, and the 14 impacted hazardous material shipping containers transposed onto the ship as seen after the accident. Hazardous container material container number 13 was in a portable tank stored in the hold below the deck. So there's where the 14 impacted hazardous material shipping containers. What it says here, it lists what was in them. And it says the Dali master activated the vessel response plan the morning of the accident by contacting crisis and emergency management firm Witt O'Brien's, the qualified individual. Resolve Marine responded as Salver. The Marine Spill Response Corporation responded as the Oil Spill Response Organization according to the vessel response plan. The Coast Guard deployed its Atlantic Strike Team and Salvage Engineering Response Team. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Navy Supervisor of Salvage and Diming, among many other agencies, also responded. Responders deployed containment boom around the ship, conducted atmospheric monitoring, and plugged the deck scuppers. According to the Unified Command, no hazardous material from containers has reached the water. Let me read that again. According to the Unified Command, no hazardous material from containers has reached the water. Salvers are transferring the bulk liquid acid to intact tanks and moving containers ashore. So that was another concern about this crash, is that there could have been hazardous material that leaked. According to this report, no hazardous material reached the water. So that's that. Okay. And then the last section coming up, they talk about the bridge itself. So we'll look at that too. Paul Wildigo thinks the ship was a disaster waiting to happen. If that ship had a problem, that ship should not have left port. So look, it does not, they're still figuring out now, and that's something they're still studying, is why exactly did two circuit breakers on the ship suddenly and unexpectedly open, cutting power just before the ship was at the bridge. They still don't know that. And they're still investigating what the situation was on the ship with the electricity system before it left the port. So there's a lot for them to look into here. And they did say, we know the ship had 2 blackouts around 10 hours before it left port. But it says here the NTSB is still investigating the electrical configuration following the first in-port blackout and potential impacts on the events during the accident voyage. So there's a lot to be uncovered here, it looks like. Aleppo Gambit says they do need to pass a Coast Guard inspection. I don't know, I don't, like, given, if the power goes out 10 hours before the ship leaves port, what are they required to have any more inspections? What are they required to do and look at? Good question. Did they not do something on that ship they were supposed to do? They talk about in this report how when the local pilot came on the ship just before it left port, I believe the captain told him everything was fine on the ship. Did the captain not mention that blackout? Was the captain supposed to mention that blackout? So, here, that's the section right here where it says, hang on, I want to show you this here. Where is it here? Have the timeline here. Yes. About 12:05 a.m., a local pilot and apprentice pilot boarded the ship. During the master pilot exchange, the senior pilot asked about the vessel's condition, and the captain reported that the ship was in good working order. So, is that something, was the blackout 10 hours before mentioned during that conversation? Is it supposed to be mentioned during that conversation? Beats me. Uncle Floyd says, oh, by the way, we lost power and swapped out some parts 10 hours ago. Paul Rayner says report will be in 2039. I don't think it'll be that late. I think it might be years though. I have to look that up, though. We're going to get to the part where they talk about the bridge. I know some people are interested in that. Aleppo says just a horrible chain of events. Hey, guys, give me about, I need about 8 seconds. Give me 8 seconds. 8 seconds. That's probably more like 10 seconds. All right. Hey, thanks to Martin Gingrich for your support. I appreciate that, Martin. Martin says shorts and wiring can flip breakers new or old. All right. Let's talk about this, this section about the ship. How many pages in the report? It is around 30-something. 24 pages. And again, I did post the link to the top of the chat, so you can look at the report all you like. I made the link available to you. All right, regarding, Barry thinks these accidents are usually the culmination of many small problems. Oh, Greg Pondell says that he had read a story saying that the one worker had a crank window and credits that for surviving. Oh, yeah. There's an article I'm looking at right now from WTOP saying that the person who survived, their attorney said he was able to survive because this car's window was manual and he rolled down the window and escaped. Why the other workers couldn't, I don't know if the other workers all in trucks where the windows were not manual, or did they have some other reason they didn't escape? I don't know. Hey, thanks, Smallest Violin. Smallest Violin, I'm not sure what primary you're talking about, but I didn't have any plans to do any election coverage today. No, I'm not going to be covering like the local primary elections. We're not going to be doing that. I'm sorry about that, Smallest Violin. I guess there's some primaries in Maryland, Nebraska, and West Virginia. But no, we will not be doing coverage of that. Sorry about that, smallest violin. I appreciate your support. All right, let's talk about the bridge. The Key Bridge was owned and operated by Maryland Department of Transportation. It was opened in 1977. Okay, there's a picture of the bridge. It was about 9,000 feet long, located over the river's navigation channel. The north and south approaches of the bridge consisted of multi-beam plate girder spans. The continuous through truss main spans of the bridge had a total length of about 2643 feet and consisted of 1,200-foot long main span and two 721-foot back spans right in here. The main span's vertical clearance was 185 feet, and its navigation horizontal clearance between the piers was about 1,100 feet. The bridge had 4 traffic lanes on it. The average daily traffic for the day was 34,000 vehicles per day, roughly, with 10% of those vehicles being trucks. Pier protection. So there's this question of like, was the bridge properly protected? Should it have been protected more in theory? So look, when the Key Bridge was constructed, 4 large dolphins, they're called dolphins, 4 large dolphins like this, 2 located on the west side of the bridge and 2 located on the east side of the bridge were also constructed at the same time to protect pier numbers 17 and 18, supporting the bridge's central through truss spans. So there's the 2 main spans, and there's one of those dolphins there, and there's one of those dolphins right there, and there's one right there. You see 1, 2, 3, and maybe one hidden back here or something. Okay. So Dolphin 1 was about 491 feet west of the center of the pier number 17 and 550 feet clear of the center line of the navigational channel. And the Dolphins were constructed with a 25-foot diameter sheet pile filled with trimmy concrete and capped with reinforced concrete. Attached at various locations of the Dolphin were 17-foot-long rubber fenders. So, here are the 4 dolphins. Dolphin, 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 dolphin. Right. So the bridge goes across this way. There's the bridge right there that goes across this way. There's part of the bridge collapsed on the front of the ship. And the 4 dolphins are 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, in addition to the dolphins, piers 17 and 18, the 2 central ones right here, were each surrounded by a 100-foot by 84.5-foot crushable concrete box and timber fendering system, which you can see right there. These systems were comprised of hollow, thin-walled concrete box structures attached to the piers. The timber portions of the fender were attached to the outer face of the concrete box and utilized a combination of vertical and horizontal members. Additionally, steel plates were secured at the base of the vertical timber members. The Dali struck pier number 17 here and the fendering system surrounding the pier, but did not contact Dolphin number 1 or its rubber fenders. Both fendering systems surrounding piers number 17 and 18 were further damaged during the collapse of the truss spans of the bridge when components of the truss spans impacted portions of the fenders as the components fell into the water. The Key Bridge was subject to regular inspections and was in accordance with National Bridge Inspection Standards. Okay? These periodic inspections are intended to maintain safe bridge operation and prevent structural and functional failures. In addition to routine bridge inspections, the bridge's steel truss design and location required 2 additional types of inspections be performed. One of those focused on the non-redundant steel tension members within the steel truss, and the other examined the bridge's underwater members. The last inspection of the non-redundant steel tension members was completed in May 2023, and the last underwater bridge inspection was completed in March 2021. Data from these inspections and the routine inspections were entered into the Federal Highway Administration National Bridge Inventory, indicating that bridge inspectors rated the conditions of the deck, the superstructure, and the substructure as being in satisfactory condition. So the bridge apparently was up to date with its inspections, and nothing was seen as being significantly wrong with the bridge by the inspectors. Now, maybe they will change the regulations for bridges. I don't know, like this, but it was up to code. Placebo says this isn't an inspection problem. A gigantic ship crashed into it. And then the last part here is ongoing activities, and then I'll take some comments. Ongoing activities. The NTSB will continue evaluating the design and operation of the Dali's power distribution system, including its circuit breakers. Examination of damage to the vessel will continue when the ship is clear of debris and moved to a shoreside facility. Again, yesterday, as many of you know, there was a, I should get that for you because I have it here. Yesterday, as many of you know, the big chunk of the bridge that was sitting on the ship was demolished. Maybe I can actually show that real quick because I have it via Reuters here. Where is it here? I have to just pull it up. Let me pull it up here and see if I can do this. I have to just find the time code here. All right, around, what was it? 1. Okay. Oopsie. Hold on one second here. Okay, I'm going to have that for you in a second. I'll show it for you in a second. Anyways, the NTSB is going to continue evaluating the design and operation of the power distribution system on the ship, including its circuit breakers. Examination of damage to the vessel will continue when the ship is clear of debris and moved to a shoreside facility, which is in progress because they have now cleared. They've demolished that big piece that was. Or big piece or pieces that was on the ship, on top of the ship. The NTSB is working with parties to immediately assess their bridges and determine whether pier protection needs to be improved. Okay, again, the NTSB is working with parties to immediately assess their bridges and determine whether pier protection needs to be improved. Specifically, the MDTA is studying short-term and long-term options for upgrades to the existing protection system for the eastbound and westbound spans on the Governor William Preston Lane Jr. Memorial Bridge, commonly known as the Bay Bridge near Annapolis, Maryland. The NTSB is also examining the pier protection improvements that have been made on the following bridge collapses resulting from marine vessel strikes that the NTSB has investigated: the Sunshine Skyway Bridge in Tampa Bay, Florida, Queen Elizabeth Causeway Bridge near South Padre Island, Texas, and the I-40 Bridge near Webbers Falls, Oklahoma. Interviews, including with bridge experts, waterways management personnel, marine safety, and highway regulators and vessel operators, are planned. Detailed analysis of the VDR bridge audio and further validation of video data recorder parameters continues. Planned areas of investigation include ocean-going vessels' propulsion and electrical systems, the frequency and causes of vessel contacts with bridges over navigable waters, and bridge strike mitigation measures such as a combination of vessel size restrictions, vessel assist tugs, and bridge pier protection. So things like, should bridges be better protected? Should the tugboats stay with the bridges, stay with the ships for longer until they're until they're past a bridge or something like that? Things you guys have been asking about. Should vessels be limited in size in a way they're not if they're in certain ports? They're looking at all that stuff. The NTSB investigation of all aspects of the accident is ongoing as we determine the probable cause. So they're still determining the probable cause. And let me just show you, if I have it here, I can show you the video via Reuters from yesterday when they did that demolition. Okay. All right, so here is, I'm going to pull this up right now for you guys. This is the video from yesterday. I'm sorry we didn't cover this yesterday. I didn't think I was going to have access to the video, and I found out too late I did. I thought I didn't have access to this, so I wish I had known earlier, and it's kind of partly my fault. But you know, I kind of got access to this late. So if I had realized it, I would have been on the air yesterday. But so let me just pull this up here and show you quickly. This is from yesterday here, and eventually you'll see what happens. Hold on, I'm going to get it queued up. I'm getting it queued up. Here it is. You guys ready? All right, some of you have seen this, but again, this is via Reuters. I get this footage from Reuters. This is yesterday, and let me just make sure of something here. Here it is. So this is when they demolished, so they could take it away, this big piece here. I think there's audio on it too. This was yesterday. It's not live, it was yesterday. There you go. You have to remind yourself how big those things are. Like you see that and you're like, oh, they're really little. No, that ship is enormous. Those things are enormous. It's crazy to see them kind of just fall down like that, because those are enormous pieces of, what is it, steel? Placebo says each of those boxes is like a semi-truck trailer. I think they go around here maybe. So again, this was yesterday. I'm sorry we didn't cover it yesterday, but this is the video from yesterday via Reuters. I think they kind of zoom in maybe. Let's see here. Yeah, that might be it. That might be it. Want to see it one more time? One more time we'll do it. We'll show you one more time. Again, this is from yesterday. Jane Jones says it's amazing they can do that. Wickedest Witch says it was an NBC helicopter video. They flew around the ship. Afterwards, helps to appreciate the size of everything. I can't show these are the video. This is the video I have access to for this. I can't show all the other videos. Anyways. All right, I want to take a last few comments here. So, yeah, you can see there's some stuff that they have found out, and there's a lot that they haven't found out on this. You know, again, the power went out when 2 circuit breakers unexpectedly opened up just before the ship was at the bridge. And it's not clear why that happened right now. Also, another thing that we talked about is around 10 hours before the ship left port, it had 2 blackouts, the second following on top of the first. And the first blackout was caused by a crew member basically mistakenly closing something. And after those 2 blackouts, while recovering, they did switch circuit breakers on the ship from using 2 they'd been using for months to 2 other ones. And those 2 other ones ended up opening up unexpectedly when the ship was just before the bridge. So we talked about that. You know, we talked about a bunch of other stuff. How the one survivor there was two survivors who were on the bridge, but one of them was unharmed totally, an inspector, and he literally ran off the bridge when the accident happened, and he survived by running onto the nearest part of the bridge, the nearest span that didn't get destroyed. So he basically ran off the bridge as the bridge collapsed behind him. So we read that. Bunch of stuff in here. And there was no problem that they uncovered with the fuel. They tested the fuel. It all came out fine. Drug tested the crew. Nobody was on drugs or alcohol. Anyways, I'll take a few more comments now, but you can either go back and watch the video, or I've posted the link to this, so you can link this. Maybe, you know, I forget I thought they said this could take years, this inspection or this investigation, if I remember right from a press conference. But who knows? Maybe we'll do a stream when the final inspection report comes out. Is the river open? It's not completely open. I think they might have opened certain parts of it to do certain things. I have to go check on that. Yeah, I don't remember how long the inspection will take. Let me see if I can find... Aleppo thinks the NTSB takes about a year. I thought they said maybe years. I'm not sure. Oh, yeah. Right. I'm looking at an article that says it could take up to 2 years to complete. There's a CNN article that says it could take up to 2 years to complete. Emerson says if it happened a little earlier, they would have had time to stop the ship. But yeah, really unfortunate timing. It lost power 3 ship lengths before it hit the bridge. Artful Nothing says 1 lane is open. There was an account I followed that talked about that. What was that account? Am I still following it? At one point, I was seeing updates about opening parts of it. Oh, there's another video that popped up, by the way. This is from Maryland Department of Transportation. I can show you this too. It's from a little further away. Yeah, that was yesterday. Where is... Does anyone know where that... there was some account online, I think it was a Twitter account, where they were talking about the reopenings. Can't find it. It's not USAC. It's Baltimore County Emergency Management? WBAL had a story? Let me look it up. can't find it. Oh, maybe this is it. So I was trying to get you an answer on that, on the current status. Yes, so there is a report here. There's a limited access channel that was opened. It looks like WBAL says. Oh, here it is right here. I found it. Port update. This is from Port of Baltimore as of today. Oh, they just posted this 32 minutes ago. Gosh, it's small. U.S. Coast Guard captain of the port has officially reopened the Fort McHenry limited access channel to an available depth of 45 feet for commercial vessel traffic daily from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The channel has a 350-foot horizontal clearance and a vertical clearance of 214 feet due to power lines. Fine. So it looks like there's some limited access port. I'll post a link to this. The Port of Baltimore's permanent 700-foot wide, 50 feet deep long channel is expected to be reopened by the end of May. Okay? So the permanent main channel is expected to be reopened by the end of May, they say. This is a limited access channel. All right. Yeah, in terms of like shipping back up and stuff, that I don't know about. But they do say right at the end at the bottom, it says that the permanent 700-foot wide, 50 feet deep channel is expected to be reopened by the end of May. And I guess they just, like a lot of those giant beams, they just leave on the floor of the water, right? On the floor of the river, right? They blow it up and then just let the stuff sink. And it just sits there. I assume. Unless there's something they have to have. Uncle Floyd says, not easy cleaning up that mess. Amazing work being done. Are they going to crane them up? Oh, they're going to crane everything up? I didn't even know that. Wow, so they are picking up the debris? They're craning up all the debris? I didn't hear that. A bunch of our viewers are saying I assumed they were just going to leave it there. Everybody's saying it'll be removed. Oh, you're saying because like it's so centrally, even if they wanted to, it would be a danger to other ships coming through, right? I see. I guess in my mind, I wasn't really thinking straight. And I was thinking like, oh, it'll be out of the way so they can just leave it. But it is like in the main channel. So that would be, you would not want big pieces down there that would lessen the depth of the channel, I guess. That makes sense. I understand what you're saying. I think that makes sense. I would believe you that they would just get the stuff out of there. Yes, Nick Sutton says the Army Corps of Engineers has talked about needing to remove the debris because the channel has to be a certain depth, and if they leave the debris, it's difficult to dredge. Interesting. Interesting. All right. Army vet says water not deep enough for passing. Okay, guys. Well, we have. If you want to know what kind of cargo was on the ship, they actually talk about it in the report. You can click on the link at the top of the chat, and I've put the report there. If anybody missed the broadcast, you can rewind. We went through the report, or you can click on the link at the top of the chat, and I put the report there for you. All right, guys, I think it's our time. I appreciate you joining me for this live broadcast. Again, something a little different, kind of reading through a report, but I thought it was important. It was a big story, and I wanted to go through the report and see that it had just come out today, just come out this afternoon, and go through it with you and see what details it said. So a little different kind of stream today, but I really appreciate you joining. And I appreciate all of your comments, a lot of interesting comments and questions from you guys. So more news to come. If you like the broadcast, subscribe and follow Agenda Free TV. Hang on one second here. By the way, our viewer Kiwi ZNZ said a breaker would only open usually if there was an electrical fault or a power surge downstream indicating excessive current was going through the breaker that exceeded its rating or the breaker itself was faulty. Thank you, Kiwi NZ. Sorry, I missed that before. I appreciate you writing in. Missed a couple messages here. Then also Evelyn in Maine shared a BBC article talking about how the Baltimore has sued the operators of the container ship, saying it was unseaworthy and accuses its owners and manager of negligence. But again, I don't think the city of Baltimore has information about why, all the details of why this happened that the NTSB doesn't have. Thanks so much, Evelyn, for sending that in. By the way, our viewer Missile Hatch said overheated wires from the closed exhaust causing them to short out. Now, I don't know anything about like ships or electricity really, so thanks for writing in, Missile Hatch. What I'm going to be doing is waiting until some of these like ship and electricity experts post some videos, and maybe I'll watch them and get some of their insight. This was supposed to be kind of just an initial, let's go over the report initially and just kind of do an overview of what's in there. Let's see here. Hey, I want to thank, so I appreciate you guys being here. I really want to thank our moderators. Thanks so much, Cynthia Moon, Ruth Kafasi, for moderating. Our moderators, we can't do streams without our moderators. We couldn't have chats. So, and chats are an essential part of the stream. So really appreciate all of our mods. Cynthia Moon, Ruth Kafasi, Kinetic, DJC Mobile Tech over there on YouTube. Hang on a moment here. Oh, by the way, I missed a thank you. Thanks, Michelle Batten. Michelle Batten and Jeanette Tover gave Facebook stars. Thank you. I missed that before. So thanks to all of our YouTube moderators. Thanks for moderating over there on Twitch. Big Ball of Yarn, David Green, Papa Bear, McBritches, Sharon C54, Sarah. Huge thanks. Kay Lowry Body, Christina Neal, Ryan Anderson. I saw Paul Anderson and Margaret Riley were moderating over there on Facebook. Much appreciated to all of our mods. If I get updates on this, I will post them on my X account, which is @Lookner. That is where I post about breaking news when I'm not on the air. I'll put the link in the chat @Lookner on X. Oh, and I want to encourage you. Sorry. First of all, thanks to everybody who donated. That's really nice of you. Thanks to Kenneth Colton, our member, by the way, and everybody donated. Very nice of you. Your support is what keeps this channel going, so much appreciated. If you ever want to donate, you can go to agendafree.tv, agendafree.tv. But thanks for your support. And I want to encourage you, if you want to know when I'm going live, I generally don't know in advance when big news is going to happen, so I don't know when I'm going live. But we have a very, very good notification system set up through Discord that's free, and we have set up this notification system. You sign up for free, and then you're sent a notification right before we go live every time. If you want to sign up for the notifications, which I recommend, the mods will post the link to do that in the chat right now. It's right there. I see it there. And also you can find that link on our Facebook and YouTube descriptions of this broadcast. And thanks to our Discord mods too. If anybody out there is interested in being a volunteer mod, that'd be awesome. We sometimes have a wait list. You can ask our mods for more information about that. And what else was I going to mention here? Oh, we also have a Discord chat. You can chat with other viewers when we're not live. A lot of our viewers like doing that. To check out the Discord chat, it's the same as the notifications link. So you can click on that link and check out the chat as well. And I want to say thanks to our Facebook subscribers, our Twitch subscribers, and our YouTube members. But before I do that, really quick reminder also, I do have a personal channel. Sometimes I do some non-news live streaming, and that is called Lookner on YouTube and Look Nerd on Twitch with a D. Look Nerd with a D on Twitch, so you can check that out if you'd like. Okay, thanks to our Twitch subscribers. Appreciate all of you over there. For example, Big Ball of Yarn, David Goliath, David Green, Shaggy, Wall Street, Sharon C54, Haas McKayfabe, much appreciated. Drunk Can't Cook, Stash Glass, Jackson22. Shout out to all of our subscribers over there on Twitch. On Facebook, thanks to all of our subscribers there. Eve Richards, Lou Green, Duster Singer, Billy Joe Drage, Kay Lowry Body, Margaret Riley, Lacey Carter, Ronald Egner. Oh, Ronald was moderating too. Thanks, Ronald. I appreciate that. Thanks to all of our mods. And also our YouTube members. Thanks to all of our YouTube members. Much appreciated. People like Dr. McRib's Phone, The Lucky Minute, Mythical, Evelyn in Maine, Bex in Wonderland, Paul Rayner, Can Aiken, Crazy Mom of Four, Evelyn in Maine, Buffalo Women, Wickedest Witch, Donna Smith, Marty Hagwood, PZ Papa Zulu, Lois Cox, Marissa Pugliese, and all of our YouTube members. Thank you. Evelyn in Maine as well. And the last thing we're going to do, I think I'm going to see, what is the name of this channel? Oh, have they posted yet? Yeah, I'm going to look at, there's a channel called What is Going On with Shipping on YouTube, that this guy, Sal Mercogliano, is a ship expert. He posts videos. So I'm going to be seeing if he posts a video. Maybe he'll look at the report and post a video on his thoughts after this preliminary report has come out. So I'll be checking that channel. It's called What is Going On with Shipping on YouTube. You might want to see if he posts a video over there at some time soon. All right, guys, I am going to wrap up this live stream. Appreciate you joining, people like Javaris, and Melissa Terry, all of our viewers. Thanks for Shwedi, all of our viewers. Thanks for joining for this stream. Okay, guys, that is it for now. We have been talking about the preliminary NTSB report about the Baltimore Bridge collapse. So that is it for now. If there's some big news tonight, I'll come back on the air, but more live streaming soon. And thank you, Euler Void. Thank you, and Ann Breedenstein for watching too. That is it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon with more live breaking news coverage right here at Agenda Free TV.